Hi, I'm Elio. 2 weeks ago, my brother stood in the middle of the living room, pointed at me like I was something he'd been meaning to throw out for years, and spat, "You've ruined everything we built." And the worst part, my parents nodded as if he'd just spoken some undeniable truth, as if I had deserved it. I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself, I didn't break. I just left. No suitcase, no destination. Just a single duffel bag and the kind of silence that feels heavier than shouting ever could. But this morning I woke up to 11 missed calls, and suddenly they say they need me. So here's my question. What changed? Before I tell you the rest, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? Leave a comment because maybe you've been here too. That moment when you realize you've been cut out, forgotten, until they remember they need the one they so easily discarded. It was already dark when it happened, but somehow the air inside the house felt even heavier than the night pressing against the windows. Jasper, my brother, sat perched on the edge of our parents' velvet gray armchair, legs crossed back, straight like a man who never doubted the weight of his own words. The soft glow of his studio lights framed him like he was something important. He was wrapping up yet another live stream bragging about breaking 100,000 subscribers on his podcast. My parents sat nearby nodding along like he'd just discovered oxygen. And me, I stood in the doorway, fingers curled around a chipped ceramic mug, the tea inside already cold from the second time I'd reheated it. I listened to them celebrate. Everything but me. I hadn't heard my name in over an hour. Not that I expected to. I had mastered the art of disappearing in my own home. Sometimes I wondered if the walls noticed me more than they ever did. Then it happened. The screen flickered. His fake smile slipped. And like a blade, his voice spiked sharp enough to cut the air in half. "Not again, not you." His glare landed on me like I just ruined everything by simply existing. "Why does this always happen when you're around?" he hissed. "You suck the energy out of the room just by breathing Elio." I blinked, stunned, and just like clockwork, no one said a word. Not mom, not dad. My mother stood, smoothed the front of her sweater, and without looking at me murmured, "He's not wrong. You ruin everything. You've ruined his life. You've ruined ours too." Dad didn't even lift his head. He just rubbed his eyes like this was some scene he'd already rewatched too many times. And me, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fight. I turned around, walked down the hall to the guest room they had grudgingly let me stay in like it was some charity project, and I started to pack. I didn't pack the sentimental stuff. No photos, no old notes, nothing that could remind me there had ever been anything worth staying for. 15 minutes later, I was gone. No one asked where I was going. No one asked if I'd come back. The street was silent, the kind of silence that hangs in the air after words you can never take back have already landed. I walked to the gas station, bought a granola bar and a bottle of water I didn't even want. I asked the clerk about the bus. "If he's on time, last one's in 10. He wasn't. But I waited anyway. When it finally arrived, I climbed on without looking back. The city blurred past me, neon lights smeared like wet paint. No one looked my way. No one asked me anything. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't mind. I checked into a cheap motel at the edge of downtown, the kind of place where the wallpaper peels and the air smells like smoke, and something worse underneath. The man at the desk didn't even look up. He just held out his hand and I gave him the last $42 I had. I didn't unpack. I didn't even take off my shoes. I sat on the bed staring at the ceiling. A water stain stared back, shaped like a broken heart, or maybe just a burned-out star depending on how you tilted your head. My phone stayed silent the entire time. Not once did it light up with, "Where are you? Come home." Nothing. Until it did. One notification. Not from them. Just a delivery reminder. A Father's Day gift I'd sent 2 years ago, still unopened. A journal I'd had custom embossed with my dad's initials. I remembered wrapping it in tissue paper. I remembered the letter I had slipped inside asking for a second chance. He'd never opened it. They never opened me. And yet somehow, here I still was. I woke the next morning with 270 and some loose change. No home, no job, no plan. But somehow, I felt lighter. I walked, and kept walking until my legs ached. That's when I found a tiny cafe with a chalkboard sign out front. free Wi-Fi, coffee refills all day. That was all I needed. I spent $1.75 on the smallest cup they had, took the seat closest to the wall outlet, and pulled out my old phone. I logged into a tutoring platform I'd made years ago, the one I had never used because I thought no one would ever want my help. I updated my profile, college prep, writing support, study planning, patient, reliable, still standing. And just like that, that's where I started again. So tell me, when did you realize you had to rebuild from nothing? In the About Me section, I typed, I believe in showing up even when no one else does. By noon, I had submitted 16 applications, parents desperate for help, students buried under pressure, strangers I understood more deeply than my own family ever tried to understand me. Halfway through the fifth application, I paused. There it was, staring back at me from the bio section. Patient, compassionate listener. The words felt like they landed somewhere deeper than I expected. I could almost hear Grandma Jewel's voice again, clear as if she were sitting right next to me. You were always the quiet one who listened when no one else did. She used to tell me that when I sat cross-legged at her feet during Sunday lunches, the only one not trying to talk over everyone else. While they chased spotlights and talked loud enough to fill the whole block, she'd glance down at me, give my shoulder a squeeze, and see something. Not loud, not impressive, not the kind of thing you clap for, but something real. I swallowed hard because another memory hit me square in the chest. The funeral. I remembered standing stiffly in that reception hall, surrounded by people I barely knew, balancing a flimsy plate of cold pasta salad and bad coleslaw. That's when one of Grandma's old neighbors leaned in, lowered her voice, and said, her second letter was beautiful. I hope it brought you some peace. I remember blinking confused. Second letter. I only got one. She froze, tilted her head, her smile faltering. Oh, maybe I misunderstood. I just remember her mentioning she wrote you another about 8 months before she passed. But I had never received it. 3 days later, still trying to give my mother the benefit of the doubt, I asked her about it. She didn't even look up from her phone when she muttered, it wasn't anything important. Just sweet old lady things. Just sweet old lady things. Another thing erased, like me. It's the kind of slow erosion you don't even notice is happening until you wake up one day and realize you've been rubbed out edge by edge, moment, by the very people who claim to love you. I shut the memory down, forced myself to refocus on the applications, and then a ding. One parent responded, then another. By the end of the week, I had 3 clients, 2 high schoolers, 1 adult prepping for a GED. The public library just 2 blocks from the cafe let me borrow Chromebooks for online sessions. I reserved a 2-hour slot every afternoon, and I used it like my life depended on it because it did. The pay wasn't much, but every single dollar felt earned. And the students, they listened. They asked questions. They thanked me. One girl, Leah, paused during our second session and whispered, you're the first person who's ever explained this in a way that actually makes sense. And there it was, the jolt of being seen by strangers in ways I had never once been seen at home. That night, I walked back to my tiny rented room above a pawn shop. I grabbed the faded receipt from the night I checked in, flipped it over, and started writing. Hours worked. Payments received on Venmo. What little I had left. How much longer I could afford to stay. 2 more nights, maybe 3 if I skipped eating again. I looked around the cramped space. It still smelled faintly of bleach and damp curtains, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. Something unfamiliar but undeniably real stirred in my chest. Pride. I whispered to the empty room. They never noticed what I was building. Because they never believed I could. And this wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. Cold. Clean. I lay back on the bed, fully clothed, staring up at the peeling ceiling tiles. The hum of vending machines outside, the low murmur of strangers through paper-thin walls, it felt like the soundtrack of rock bottom. I reached for my phone, ready to mute the world for the night. That's when I saw it. A new post had just gone live. Family is who shows up when it matters. Don't ever forget that. Jasper's caption. There he was, glowing next to our mother, both holding glasses of something sparkling. I barely registered their forced smiles before something in the background stole my breath. The family photo on the wall. I leaned in, thumb zooming instinctively. There it was, the hallway I knew like the back of my hand, the soft shadow from that familiar old lamp. But the frame had changed. Gani was the old photo we had taken when I was 17. The one that had me in it. In its place, a polished, glossy new shot. Jasper dead center. Mom beaming in her cream sweater. Dad stiff but trying to smile like someone had coached him. And Bruno, the black lab they got after I left, sitting perfectly at their feet. It looked like a Hallmark ad for the family I used to belong to. Except I wasn't in it. Not a mention. Not a trace. Not even a shadow. Just a sanitized, edited version of what used to be us. The messy parts erased, including me. I didn't cry. I thought I would. I wanted to. But all I felt was a slow, steady heat rising in my chest. Not sadness, not rage, something quieter, heavier. The kind of ache you feel when someone throws away your name like it was nothing and expects you not to notice. It wasn't rage. It was something quieter, heavier, like standing there and watching someone toss a letter in the trash before even reading it, and knowing that letter was yours. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the phone still glowing in my hand. And for the first time in my life, I didn't search for an excuse to soften what they'd done. Not this time. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't bad timing. This was deliberate. This was official. I hadn't just been erased emotionally, not just pushed to the background like some overlooked side character. I had been erased physically, as if I'd never existed in the first place. Scrolling back through Jasper's feed made it impossible to ignore. Post after post, caption after caption, throwback to the good old days, family brunch with my tribe. Couldn't be prouder of this crew. I looked closely at every single photo. Sometimes I caught a glimpse of myself, half a face, a blurred shoulder, a shadow in the corner. Other times I had clearly been cropped out entirely. And now I was just gone, like I had never stood in those frames to begin with. A memory hit me so hard it felt like drowning. I was 9 standing on a stool at church because I was too short to fit the family lineup. Jasper, already taller and louder than everyone else, leaned in and joked, "Elio always looks like he photobombed us." Everyone laughed. Even Mom had smirked before casually excusing it by saying, "He's just shy, that's all." But they still shifted me to the very end of the lineup. Out of frame was easier, neater. I blinked the memory away and reached for my tote bag, desperate to focus on anything else. I opened my laptop, buried myself in tutoring requests, answered messages like they were urgent even though they weren't. It was mindless, mechanical until I checked the spam folder. There it was, almost missed RE Family Podcast opportunity sent by Jasper. I opened it slowly. I hadn't even been addressed directly. Just CC'd, like background noise, like an afterthought. My throat tightened as I read the body of the email. A polished, press-ready pitch to a PR rep. "We're thrilled to present a conversation on modern family dynamics framed through the lens of resilience and social media influence." Every word felt like a slap because I already knew exactly who was being framed as the success story and who wasn't even invited to speak. But then right at the bottom, I saw the part that wasn't dressed in corporate buzzwords or PR polish. "He's just bitter and emotionally unstable. We don't talk for a reason. I don't want him involved." It's taken years to rebuild the family's image. My breath hitched. My hand clenched so tightly around my phone that I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. Bitter, unstable, rebuild. I read those words 3 times, each time sharper, each time louder, each time more final. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel the urge to defend myself. Instead, I took a screenshot, then another. The next morning, I printed them at the library and walked back to my tiny rented room. I taped them on the wall right next to Grandma Jules' letter, 2 pieces of paper side by side, one from the woman who believed I could build something real, one from the family who believed I wasn't worth seeing. I grabbed the motel's notepad and started writing. Dates, comments, moments, every subtle cut, every whispered erasure. It didn't feel petty. It felt necessary, like proof that I hadn't imagined it. Later that week, an email came in from a Dallas-based SAT prep group. They'd reviewed my profile and wanted to onboard me for virtual sessions, $75 per student. A number I hadn't seen in years. I accepted it without a second thought. No jumping, no smiling, just a quiet, steady kind of satisfaction. By Friday night, I had saved enough to move out. A small room in a shared apartment on the other side of town. Not fancy, not perfect, but it had a door that locked. No flickering neon sign, no paper-thin walls. I sat on the edge of my new bed, tracing the edge of that printed email with my thumb. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel stuck. I felt free. I wasn't angry anymore. I was awake. And there's a difference. That's when I heard a knock on the door, sharp, hesitant. I stood heart tight and opened it slowly. There she was, Mila, my former best friend. She looked smaller somehow, paler, like the weight of something heavy had been sitting on her for days. In her hands was something wrapped in an old dish towel, like she'd tucked it away, hiding it from the world. Elio, she whispered, her voice trembling. They told me you were in trouble. I didn't believe them until I saw this. I stepped aside to let her in, but she hovered at the threshold like crossing that line would make her complicit in something she wasn't ready to face. Slowly, she held out a small envelope, the kind I used to buy in bulk from the dusty stationery shop by the train station. And there it was, my name, written in my own handwriting, soft, rounded letters I hadn't used in months. My throat tightened. I could barely breathe. It's still sealed, she whispered, like raising her voice might shatter the air between us. Elio, I found it in your mom's desk, under a stack of expired coupons. I didn't move, not right away. I just stood there staring at it, afraid of what it might confirm. I wasn't snooping, she added quickly, setting it down gently on the little table by the microwave. I was dropping off something for Jasper. Verena had me waiting in the kitchen, and it was just sitting there, like it meant nothing. Finally, I reached for it. The envelope was untouched. No creases, no smudges, still sealed. It looked exactly the way it had the day I placed it in the mailbox last year for my mother's birthday. I had saved for weeks to buy a gift card to her favorite cafe. I'd spent even longer writing the letter inside carefully, hopefully about second chances, about trying again, about maybe healing something that had felt broken for so long. She'd never even opened it. Mila sat across from me, her mouth twitching like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. And I just stared at the envelope, frozen. Slowly, I slid my fingernail beneath the flap. The paper peeled open like it had been waiting for me all along. Inside was the card and the soft blue sheet I had folded with so much care. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it and read my own words, feeling like I was listening to someone else's voice on a tape recorder. Mom, if there's still a space in your heart for me, I'd like to sit there again. Not asking for everything, just a call back. I miss our Sunday walks. I miss you. Love, Elio. I read it twice, then folded it back slowly, carefully, like it still mattered. But I knew the truth now. It hadn't mattered enough. Not enough to open, not enough to throw away. Just left under a pile of coupons forgotten. Like one of those scratch-off tickets you already know won't win. Mila cleared her throat softly, breaking the silence between us. That wasn't all I found, she whispered. She reached into her tote bag and slid a stack of printed pages across the table toward me. Jasper's new site, she muttered. The Edison Learning Hub, or whatever he's calling it now. Her voice cracked like she hated being the one to show me. I used to help you build this stuff. Remember, I'd know your voice anywhere. I pulled the first page closer, then the next. My breath caught halfway through. He'd taken everything. The intro text I had spent months rewriting until it felt just right. The assessment rubrics I'd worked on late into the night. The diagrams, the structure, the color palette, even the exact page layout. All of it, word for word, line for line. Except now it lived under his name. His face, his brand. Mila swallowed hard. He told people, you gave it to him, said you wanted him to have it. She rushed to say it like she already knew I wouldn't believe it. I let out a sharp, breathless sound I didn't even recognize. Something hollow that never made it past my throat. Even the sidebars, I muttered under my breath. Even the damn section headers. My voice wavered, but I didn't move. I couldn't. I knew if I moved even an inch, I'd fall apart right there on the floor. So I stayed still, holding onto the table like it was the only thing keeping me from being swallowed whole. Mila didn't say anything else. She knew better than to fill that kind of silence. Later that night after she left, eyes glassy, mouth tight, like she had swallowed every word she didn't know how to say, I was alone again. The room settled back into its usual hum, the mini fridge rattling in the corner, the old pipes groaning like they were ready to collapse, the weight of nothing pressing in from every side. And then the buzzing started. My phone lit up, missed call, dad, then another and another. 14 in total. Voicemails followed. I didn't listen at first, but something in me cracked just wide enough to press play on the last one. It was Dad. His voice sounded thinner, like it had aged overnight. Elio, your brother's getting dragged all over the internet. Some blog picked up the story. They're calling it plagiarism. People are furious. He's telling everyone you're lying. But we need you to step in. We need you to help calm it down. He's not handling it well. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just the same old pattern. We need you. When it burns. I didn't answer. I didn't even text back. I just sat there in the dark, phone buzzing in my lap like a reminder of the role they only ever gave me, the cleanup crew for a mess I didn't make. The screen kept lighting up, then fading, then lighting up again. Over and over, like it was mocking me. The sound gnawed at me sharp and thin like a mosquito at the edge of sleep, relentless, insistent, never letting up. I let out a bitter breath and whispered to the empty room, they only ever call when I can fix what they broke. My arms felt heavy like they belonged to someone else. I folded forward, resting my forehead on my knees. Still no tears. Just something deeper, quieter, like a grief so old and heavy it didn't even knock anymore. It just settled in like it had always lived there. I reached for my laptop, the old one with the battery that barely held a charge, and opened the folder I hadn't touched in months, Curriculum Archive. I hovered over the delete key. Maybe this was it. Maybe I should just let it go. Erase it all, the way they had tried to erase me. But then something caught my eye. A folder I hadn't opened in years, Grandma Legal. My pulse skipped as I clicked it open. There was just one file inside a scan I barely remembered saving. Will Elio PNG. I double-clicked. And there it was, clear as day. Her signature, her handwriting. A clause written in the kind of firm, careful script I knew by heart. I, Julia Warren, leave all educational materials, curriculum designs, and tutoring frameworks solely to Elio Warren, my rightful heir to this work. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. The words were right there. Undeniable. Legal. Mine. It was mine, legally. Fully, unquestionably mine. The very work Jasper had stolen. The same work they had buried under his name. The legacy they had tried to erase. And all along it had been here quietly waiting. The next morning I woke to the weight of that scanned file still pressing on my chest. I sat at the edge of my bed, watching thin sunlight crawl through the dusty blinds. It hit the corner of my laptop screen like some quiet spotlight from something bigger than me. I opened the file again, reading the words I couldn't unsee. All intellectual property and preparatory curriculum created or co-developed with Elio Warren shall remain under his sole name. Stamped, signed, undeniable. My grandmother had protected me, quietly, legally, completely, and my mother had ignored it like it had never existed. I took a sip of coffee from the chipped mug on my nightstand, cold and bitter now. My phone buzzed again, another voicemail, the second one that morning. I didn't want to hear it, but my thumb hovered over the play button anyway. Why not? I was already spiraling. Verina's voice came through, softer than usual, thin and worn like the edges of a note you've read too many times. Oh, Elio, please. You can't just let the family fall apart. Your brother's career is hanging by a thread. The family, she said, but I knew what she meant. Them. The ones who replaced my face in their pictures. The ones who left my letter buried under expired coupons. Then another voicemail. This time Jasper himself. His voice cracked sharp with something almost like panic. You're just bitter. You've always been bitter. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us. I could almost see him pacing around some pristine studio apartment, camera lights off, mascara running down the face of the image he had built for strangers. His words echoed like a script I'd heard too many times before. We gave you everything. The lie hit harder than I expected. I let out a bitter breath. You erased me, and you still expect me to be your savior. My hands didn't shake this time. I printed the will. No performance. No tears. Just clarity. I pinned it to the wall next to the screenshot of Jasper's email and next to Grandma Julia's faded note. Typed, printed, handwritten. 3 different forms, but all pointing to the same truth. I had been erased. And now they were standing outside the wreckage asking me to repaint myself into their picture, just so they wouldn't have to face what they'd broken. I stared at that wall for a long time. By lunch, I had already made my decision. I searched for a lawyer, someone in Austin who specialized in intellectual property and legacy rights. I booked the consultation quietly. No one needed to know. When I arrived, I handed over the printout and spoke in a voice I barely recognized. I'm not asking to sue, I told her. Not yet. I just want it documented, verified, filed. I want ownership to be public. I want it known. Margot, the lawyer, didn't flinch. She scanned the document, raised her brows slightly, and tapped her pen on the paper like she already knew how this was going to go. You don't need a lawsuit to take back what's already yours, she said calmly. You just need a notice. I left her office with official paperwork in hand. The sun was warm on my back as I walked to the bus stop, and for the first time in years, I felt something curl in my chest that I almost didn't recognize. Control, mine, real. But peace, that didn't last long. That night, there was a knock. 3 sharp raps, firm, familiar. I froze for a second, then moved toward the door. I peeked through the peephole, and what I saw nearly knocked the breath out of me. It was them. Verena, Gareth, Jasper. I opened the door but didn't step aside. I didn't invite them in. We stood there cramped in the narrow hallway, the air between us so thick it felt like one wrong word might shatter it all. Verena's hands trembled as she tried to hold her composure. Gareth stood behind her, silent as always, his jaw tight like he didn't want to be there at all. And Jasper looked like the shell of the person he had built online. His eyeliner smudged the polished shine already cracking at the edges. Verena spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. We made mistakes, she said, twisting her fingers nervously. We know, but family means forgiving. I didn't blink. No, I answered, my voice steady and flat. Family meant not burning my letters. It meant opening my envelope. It meant saying my name in your appreciation posts. Verena dropped her gaze, too drained to argue. I turned to Jasper. He met my eyes like someone backed into a corner, not because he felt sorry, but because he had nowhere else to go. This time I didn't hesitate. I'm not the one fixing your mess, I told him quietly. And then I closed the door. Click, lock. No shouting, no slamming. Just the sound of something ending for good. Later that night, after I had showered off the tension, I sat on the couch with a cup of chamomile tea. I opened my laptop thinking I might finally get a quiet moment. But there it was, bright, bold, red. Your professional site has been flagged and temporarily suspended due to multiple copyright violation claims. My stomach dropped. I clicked through the notifications, scanning the details. Anonymous IP, copyright claims, filed against my own work. They had come for me again, not with words this time, with paperwork. But this time, I was ready. Margot called within the hour. It traces back to Jasper's agency, she said flatly. It's not a mistake. It's deliberate. I didn't panic. I didn't fall apart. I opened a new folder on my desktop, took a deep breath, and began. Screenshots of every page, timestamps, lesson plans, diagrams, and outlines. The scanned will. Early drafts dated years before Jasper ever launched anything. I gathered it all, piece by piece, proof by proof. I drafted my counterclaim with a tone I hadn't used in years. Steady, unapologetic, and completely done, performing for people who had never really listened. As I gathered every file, every scan, every timestamp, I whispered to myself like a quiet promise, I don't scream anymore. I document. By that afternoon, I sent the email. Clean, formal, professional. In light of recent confusion, please find attached original course materials, timestamps, early drafts, and notarized documentation verifying my sole ownership of all content. Thank you for your continued trust. The responses came in almost immediately. Most were supportive. A few were surprised, but one stopped me cold. A single mom from Houston, one of my clients from the fall before, wrote back, "Your course saved my daughter's future. Don't let them take this from you." I printed that email and pinned it on the wall right next to the will. One paper born of blood, one born of effort, both real, both mine. By evening, the backlash started, but this time not on my doorstep. Jasper posted a cryptic message on his public page. "People love to take credit once the hard work's done." I didn't respond. I didn't have to, because I already knew the only credit that mattered was already mine. Funny how it works sometimes. But this time the internet wasn't buying it. Within the hour, someone else stepped in, an intern. Probably one Jasper had let go without a second thought. They posted everything: screenshots, timestamps, chat logs, old Canva templates, all tied to me, all dating back years. The comments section under Jasper's post flipped almost instantly. "This looks like a textbook case of erasure. Wait, why isn't Elio credited on anything? Y'all believe the family brand too easily." I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I sat there on my old couch, legs tucked under me, peppermint tea warming my palms, laptop balanced on my knees. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't feel small. I felt still, solid, strong. Just after 10 p.m., Margot called again. "Elio." She started cautious, like she was bracing me for something worse. "I don't want you to panic." I leaned back, let out a breath, steadying the rhythm of my heart. "Tell me." "They just filed an emergency injunction," she said. "They're trying to shut your site down for good." She paused. "And your name is blowing up in a Reddit thread that's gaining serious traction." So that was their next move. Not a conversation, not an apology, an ambush. I set my mug down carefully and looked back at the papers on my wall. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was public. And now it was war. The next morning I didn't rush. Not this time. I made coffee, let the kettle hiss, opened the window just wide enough to let in the sharp morning air. I let myself breathe. Only then did I sit down and open my laptop. There it was. Formal injunction filed. Cease and desist pending court review. I had known it was coming. Margot had warned me, but seeing it official, stamped real, still knocked something loose inside me. My name, my course, my students, frozen. Almost at the same time, someone forwarded me the viral Reddit thread. I knew I shouldn't click, but I did. "My brother stole everything from me and turned our family against me." The username was generic, but the wording I could spot Jasper's fingerprints all over it. Classic Jasper. She had flipped the narrative again. Now she was the victim, and me I was the bitter brother out for revenge. The jealous one, the broken one, the one tearing down the family for attention. The comments were brutal. What kind of person does this to their own family? Ungrateful much. Can't believe some people will burn their own blood for 5 minutes of fame. I almost closed the page, almost. But then right near the bottom, one comment stopped me cold. Funny how the receipts will always show up when the loud ones overplay their hand. That was it. That was the moment. I had the receipts, every single one of them. I didn't waste another second. The upload. I pulled up my webcam, no makeup, no angles, no filters, just me. I spoke not with anger, not with apology, just with truth. I held the printed will up to the camera. All educational materials remain under Elio Warren's sole name. I read the clause aloud, then I shared my screen showing everything. The original curriculum files, the early drafts with clear timestamps, the side-by-side comparisons of Jasper's rebranded content, the emails from his agency, from his PR team, every one of them with my name scrubbed out. When I finished, I leaned into the lens. "They say silence is strength," I whispered. "But sometimes, truth needs a voice. This is mine. No music, no theatrics, no begging for sympathy." I clicked upload and I let it go. The response, within 2 hours, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Old clients started sharing the video. "This man helped my son pass his GED. He worked with my daughter when no one else would. He's the reason my kid got into college." A teacher I had once collaborated with reposted my slides. A blogger I had never met stitched the video on TikTok praising the calm clarity. Even the Reddit moderators stepped in. They labeled the original thread as misinformation and locked the comments. The tide was turning, slowly but undeniably. The call that came too late. Late that night, my phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Verena. Her voice wasn't polished this time, not sharp, not performative, just tired. "We're sorry," she whispered, "not for everything. Maybe not yet, but for now, for letting it happen. You didn't deserve that, Elio." She didn't ask me to call back. And I didn't. That part of me, the part that had ached for those words since I was 9, didn't flinch, didn't reach for the phone. It just listened and let it settle. A few hours later, someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it slowly. A delivery man stood there holding a small box and a clipboard. "Certified," he said. "Signature required." I signed, closed the door behind me, and sat on the edge of my bed. I peeled back the seal, my fingers steady. Inside was a single envelope, legal-sized, cream paper, from Jasper's lawyer. I unfolded it and read the words slowly, carefully. "Proposed settlement agreement enclosed. Confidentiality required. Full rights and name restoration in exchange for non-disparagement." They were offering me a deal, a quiet exit, a trade, but they'd miscalculated something big. Silence didn't protect them anymore. It only bought my answer. The check didn't shake in my hands. It felt heavy, 6 figures worth of forgive and forget. But my fingers stayed steady as I unfolded the NDA beneath it. Withdraw all claims, delete the video, never speak publicly again. It looked like closure. But it reeked of control. I read it twice. Once as the version of me who had spent years second-guessing himself, and again as the version who didn't need permission anymore. I stood up, walked to the shredder, and slid the papers through. I stood there and listened calmly as the blades turned their silence into dust. That afternoon, I posted my final statement. No video, no music, no dramatics, just a still image. My name, my credentials. And the words, "You don't owe people silence just because they share your last name. I won't take hush money for pain I never caused." By nightfall, it was everywhere. Women from all over, former teachers, daughters disinherited by manipulation, siblings scapegoated and erased. They began sharing it, not for sympathy, but because it named something they hadn't been able to say themselves. One message stopped me. "I thought I was the only one. Thank you for saying what I couldn't." In my new home office, where I no longer had to beg for a seat at anyone's table, I hung the wrinkled paper I'd carried with me since that night in the motel. "You will build what no one sees today." Next to it, the official letter from my lawyer, ownership affirmed, IP registered, curriculum protected. My desk was nothing fancy. The window overlooked a bus stop, but it was mine. All mine. I haven't heard from them since. Not on birthdays. Not when Jasper's site was officially shut down. Not when word spread that Mom had sold the house quietly without telling anyone. Some people said it was to cover the legal fallout. Others whispered she'd finally had enough. But I didn't wait for gossip, and I didn't need apologies printed in ink or whispered through anyone else's mouth. They weren't monsters, just people who found it easier to make me the problem than face themselves. I didn't fight to punish them. I fought to free myself and freedom. It's quieter than I imagined, but it's not empty. Last month, I started a small scholarship fund in my grandmother's name. Nothing big, nothing fancy, just enough to help kids like the ones I used to tutor when I barely had enough to cover rent. Thank you notes started arriving. Most were from strangers, but one was from a student I had worked with back at the public library. "You were the first one who told me I could do it. I believed you." I sat with that letter for a long time. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. This was the life I built in the silence they once thought would bury me. A few days ago, I printed a second copy of my grandmother's note. I folded it into an envelope. No return address, no extra words, just the message that saved me once. "You will build what no one sees today." I mailed it to a girl I once tutored, the one who told me in a whisper that her parents said she was too much. The one who was told to dream smaller. And maybe one day she'll find herself sitting on the edge of a motel bed wondering if anyone sees her at all. And maybe those words will do for her what they once did for me. And maybe, just maybe, those words will find her when she needs them most. Maybe they'll do for her what they once did for me. Have you ever stopped chasing the apology that never came and realized peace was the real closure? Have you ever been erased by your own family and still found the strength to build something lasting? If you have, share your story below.